everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. And what I want to talk to you today about is gender dysphoria, the concept of gender dysphoria as a moving target. That's something that I came up with because I found a lot of individuals presenting to me with concerns of not having particular dysphoria about particular body part, later on only to find out that they feel incredibly dysphoric about it. And so an example of it would be, especially in relationship to genitals, I have a lot of individuals who presented to me at one point at not having any gender dysphoria at all in relationship to their genitals, claiming they don't want to have any surgery at all, only to find out throughout their transition that suddenly they felt a lot of dysphoria about their genitals and that suddenly they really wanted to get gender surgery. And so a lot of people tend to ask me, why is it that dysphoria tends to shift from, throughout the body or throughout, your sense of self? And why is it that gender dysphoria or some parts of ourselves at some point didn't really experience any gender dysphoria and later on to find out we're experiencing a lot of gender dysphoria in relationship to that body part? And so what I like to say is that, dysphoria in of itself is really not a static concept. So it's not that uncommon for people to not have gender dysphoria about particular body parts and later on to have a lot of dysphoria about particular body part. That's because gender dysphoria is kind of, if you will, in a sense, it's a living thing. It tends to migrate throughout your sense of self. And as you mature, and especially as you go through gender transition, you never know where it's going to migrate to. That's what it tends to do. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people, that's what tends to happen. So for example, a common example would be starting gender transition. And in the beginning, feeling a lot of gender dysphoria about just your own sense of self, your own relationship to gender. And when we start hormones, we're starting to feel our distrust tends to go down. We tend to feel much better. Depression tends to go down. Anxiety tends to go down. And our sense of self tends to feel much more confident. And then when people have been on hormones for some time, then they will start feeling a lot of dysphoria about their facial hair, for example, until they start electrolysis or laser removal. And when that facial hair tends to clear up, people then suddenly feel a lot of dysphoria about their face. When people get facial feminization surgery, then suddenly they find themselves feeling incredibly dysphoric about some other part, and so on and so forth. So the point being is that dysphoria in of itself will shift and will kind of move throughout different parts of you. And sometimes it will occupy a certain body part for a longer period of time and sometimes for a shorter period of time. And usually the more people go through gender transition and the more congruent they become with their sense of self and how they see themselves, the more dysphoria will sometimes shift. Therefore, that's why it's so common to not experience any genital dysphoria in onset, and then later on, as you become more congruent with how you see yourself, experience a lot of dysphoria in relationship to your genitals because suddenly that part is no longer congruent. That part feels incredibly now incongruent in your overall, physical transformation that you're going through. So don't forget that dysphoria is what I like to call a moving target. It will shift. And the advice that I tend to like to give individuals is be mindful that that's going to happen. Be mindful and try to factor that into your gender transition. Be aware that that's a possibility. So you may not want to have particular surgeries, but that might shift. So prepare for that. Have your expectations to be very realistic and make sure that just by factoring all of those elements in, you prepare to potentially have particular surgeries you don't intend to down the road. Now, again, it's not for everybody, but for a lot of people, those shifts tend to happen and they're very normal. Gender dysphoria is just one of the things that it tends to occupy different parts of ourselves as we go through gender transition. So keep that in mind. If you are somebody that has experienced this, please comment below. I would love to hear, especially if you have experienced part of yourself where you had zero dysphoria and then suddenly throughout your transition you experienced a lot of dysphoria and needed to do something about that part of yourself. I'd love to hear how you coped with it. I think this concept is very familiar to a lot of people, but I think in the beginning of transition, a lot of people are not really mindful of it because they haven't experienced it yet. So a lot of people just assume that they will never have dysphoria about, their voice, or they'll never have dysphoria about lack of facial hair for trans guys, for example. And then later on, as they start hormones, they realize that those things do matter to them. And then all of a sudden they're being hit with feelings of gender dysphoria. So make sure your expectations are realistic and make sure that you factor this in, because dysphoria is in fact sadly a living, moving target. So comment below, I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.